Good morning.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Yes.
Justice Zondo, we appear, me together with Mr. Hubert, on the instructions of the firm van der Merwe for Mr. Duduzane Zuma. He has been called to be here today, firstly by way of a subpoena, and I'm quickly going to sketch the background, in order to be available to lead evidence today, but also, secondly, and that's the important point for today, to cross-examine Mr. Jonas. We were instructed for that job of work, namely the cross-examination only to find out effectively yesterday afternoon after close of business that Mr. Jonas on his application will not testify today or would not be available for cross-examination and that a date has been arranged. Now, Mr. Chair, I'm only here to raise a grievance. Of course, the horse has bolted. There's nothing that we can do about it. And it is also not what we are here for, to ask that, or to say that we would have opposed the application in any form, but simply to recognize the fact that our client has interests, and this is severely prejudicial for him, that the matter be postponed today, or that the hearing does not continue today. He has traveled from abroad to be here. He has appointed attorneys and advocates to go through the record and so forth, and to be ready to proceed with the cross-examination today. And most importantly, his wife is expecting a baby by the end of this month. And his presence is elsewhere required after today. So it is important to recognize that whilst these are, of course, inquisitorial proceedings, and we don't have rights as such, there is an element of an accusatorial process that comes in when you recognize, as you have in this case, that our client is implicated by Mr. Jonas's evidence and therefore entitled to cross-examine Mr. Jonas. And then he does everything that he possibly can to be prepared for that specific event and day, and then it doesn't happen. Now, what we want to ask is simply this, that there be some form of convention between the legal team who assist you, or the secretariat, I'm not sure who it must be, and perhaps to make it clear to parties who bring applications that in terms of Regulation 11, I apologize, Rule 11.4, not Regulation 11, but Rule 11.4. Any party who brings an application must firstly cite everyone whose rights may be adversely affected, and importantly, secondly, serve the application on such a party. Now, that did not happen here, hence the embarrassment. If we knew a week ago when the application was first brought, we understand, we can see from the date on the notice of motion, it was dated for the indeed the 6th of November, last week, more than a week ago. If we knew on that day that there might have been a problem with today, we would not have gone to the expense and trouble to prepare and be here. And that, of course, has a knock-on effect, because preparation has now been done at great expense, and Mr. Zuma would probably wish to retain his present legal team to proceed with the cross-examination and not re-educate another team. And therefore, Mr. Chair, all we come here to do is raise a grievance, not claim a right, but simply ask that there be some form of convention going forward between the various legal teams so that this embarrassment for us and for the Commission as such, can be avoided in future.
No, thank you. It's a pity that Mr. Jonas' application for a postponement was not served on your side. It should have been served. But also it's a pity that nobody picked up that it had not been served before it was dealt with. I think going forward, the Commission's legal team, when they receive such an application, must just check that those who are bringing such an application have served all the relevant parties before the application can be heard. So I know the legal team is here, so they are noting that, just so that in the future we don't have this situation. So I regret that there was this inconvenience caused. I I postponed the hearing of Mr. Jonas' evidence to the 26th of November. I understand from what you have told me in chambers that on that day you are not available. I have suggested that the three legal teams, that is yourselves, the Commission's legal team, and Mr. Jonas' lawyers, should have conversations with regard to what should happen. The 26th will remain for now, but the order that I made was to the effect that Mr. Jonas would remain available after the 26th for insofar as he may be needed, and his lawyers indicated that that was fine. But we didn't indicate for how long. So the assumption was we would continue if necessary the following day, and I'm sure the day after as well. But I'm not sure how long. So I think there should just be some discussion, and then at the relevant time, at the right time, I will be informed of the discussions, and whatever may be provisionally agreed among the parties would be given to me for my final approval. And then I would indicate if I'm happy.
Indeed, Chair, that's all that we ask for. So if we, on the understanding then that we can have a dialogue with our colleagues from the legal team as well as those of Mr. Jonas, could we then be excused?
Yes, you are excused. I just mentioned this for what it is worth. I believe that I previously provisionally indicated how much time I had in mind I would grant the parties, including yourselves, for cross-examination. And I was expecting submissions to be made as to whether counsel for various implicated persons, which would have included yourself, were happy with that provisional allocation of time. I've not received anything, so I don't know whether there'll still be some dispute about the time. I seem to think I've heard that most seem to be to have no problem with the time contemplated, but I think it's important that we have some certainty going forward. So I mentioned that so that you can give it your attention.
Shall do so.
Yes. Okay,
thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
We may then be
excused.
excused.
Thank you. You are excused.
Thanks for that.
His evidence is scheduled for hearing on the 23rd of November. However, there was some communication that was sent to him that there is an opening today to fit his evidence. We are not ready to deal with his evidence today, and he is here. Having responded to the letter conveyed that was sent to him. So we would ask you to issue a direction that the original timetable stand and that his evidence be scheduled for hearing on the 23rd of November. That is in order, Chair, because there are several topics that he has to deal with. The letter sent to him invited him to deal with one of the number of topics that he has to deal with. I say these things to you and invite you to issue a direction because Mr. Manye is here in the expectation that his evidence would be heard today?
Well, I don't think it may really be necessary to issue a direction other than just to clarify. I am aware of the arrangements for him to be brought in today, but from what you are telling me and you have told me in chambers, it seems to me that those arrangements were erroneously made, because if he is supposed to cover a number of issues on the 23rd, but can only cover one issue if he gives evidence today, then he should rather not give evidence today on one issue and come back on the 23rd. He should rather give evidence on everything on the 23rd. I think that there must have been some misunderstanding somewhere about whether there would be matters that he would not be able to cover today. I'm assuming that that is the case. So I think that what I should simply confirm is that the original program that he is aware of, that he should come to give evidence on the 23rd stands. It's regrettable that he was called to come today, and he came, and now he can't give evidence. It's most regrettable. So I think we should simply say the original program for him to give evidence on the 23rd stands, and if there is any change, he would be informed, but any change would be made after looking at issues properly.
Yes. Thank you very much. And
so to the extent that it is necessary, Mr. Manyi is excused for today and should return on the 23rd.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Mkwena.
Mr. Chair, we are now ready to proceed
Looks like you.
with the evidence of Ms. Hogan.
Okay, all right.
It's now the third day, Chair. It's now the third day.
I was saying to the Advocate Chair that this is taking longer than my treason trial.
I'm sure the atmosphere is more friendlier.
Much friendlier.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Ms. Hogan, yesterday we sought to record what we thought it might have actually not been captured in your evidence. You recall that shortly after the T adjournment, unfortunately, we do not have the services of the transcribers. So we were able to detect that the evidence that might be missing from the record is in relation to page 17, paragraph 73 and 74. You did testify at length on those on those issues. Merely to save time, could you please read into the record paragraph 73 and 74?
Sure. The chairperson of Eskom, this is paragraph 73, The chairperson of Eskom announced the resignation of Mr. Marocha to a large gathering of senior managers at Eskom on the morning of Thursday, the 5th of November 2009. Whilst this was happening, I was in my office and received a call from an enraged President Zuma asking me bluntly what did I think I was doing. He was briefly in the country en route to Mozambique. He furiously instructed me to tell Bobby Gotzel to stop immediately. I warned President Zuma of the dire consequences this would have, but he would not listen. He said he would speak to me again once he was in Mozambique in an hour or so, but he did not take my repeated calls thereafter. I informed Acting President Motlanthe and said that, much against my better judgment, the President had issued me with an instruction which I was bound to obey. It made me deeply unhappy. Paragraph 74. As a consequence of President Zuma's instruction, Bobby Gotzel was forced to cancel the media briefing scheduled to announce Mr. Marocha's resignation. After Mr. Gotzel had finished briefing the staff, the media were already sitting waiting. This really put the cat amongst the pigeons. The media speculation about where Mr. Marocha was or was not, or whether Mr. Marocha was or was not the CEO of Eskom reached a crescendo, hitting headlines, newscasts, and talk shows. There was a great consternation in the country. This was not at all good for Eskom's reputation, given its financial and operational problems. Neither I nor the board were in a position to provide any clarity whatsoever, and the President was simply unavailable. I was lambasted for my silence.
Yes. Now, you also testified yesterday at great length about Mr. Marocha up until the time when he left the offices of Eskom, you recall. Now, Mr. Marocha has filed an affidavit where he takes issue with one or two of your paragraphs. May I refer you to Exhibit L, with particular reference, Mr. Chair, to page 635, just to complete that evidence.
Okay.
It should be on the second file of Exhibit L. While you're still searching for it,
Yes,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Marocha, it clearly indicates that, according to him, he's not implicated by Ms. Hogan. He only sought to clarify one or two paragraphs of Ms. Hogan's witness statement, and that is the reason why I'm affording Ms. Hogan to react on that affidavit. It's page,
what page is the
635. 635. It should be on the second file.
Oh, okay.
636, I'm told.
Can't be 636.
Yes.
Registrar, the second file goes to 300 and something or 400 and something, isn't it? Or does it go to 600?
It does, Chair.
Oh,
the second file.
So it's 636.
636.
635, I've got here.
You've got 635.
Oh. 635. Do you want me to clarify?
No, we want the Chair to find
What I have at 636,
636.
yeah, what I have at page 636 is a Gmail with Sheikh threatened Marocha in talks. That's what I have at 636. Sheikh threatened Marocha in talks, and before that, 635 is an email, I guess, from Mr. Marocha to Dr. De Vier. Are we?
And if you go at the bottom, it says notice in terms of Rule 3.3 statement of Ms. Barbara Hogan.
Yeah.
That's how you filed. We don't take issue in the way it was filed, but I think that's what I wanted to convey.
Oh, that's what we should look at now.
Yes.
Okay.
And you'd see, Ms. Hogan, on paragraph 7, Mr. Marocha states the following. He says, I wish to point only to the material contradiction in paragraph 83 of Ms. Hogan's statement, wherein she indicates that, open quotes, I requested Eunice Sheikh, at the time the labor advisor of DPE, to meet with Mr. Marocha to negotiate his terms of departure. And paragraph 8, he says, the statement of Ms. Hogan contradicts her affidavit to the South Gauteng High Court in 2010, wherein she claimed that Mr. Eunice Sheikh was appointed by President Zuma and not by herself. Refer to attached article of 27 February 2010 entitled Sheikh Threatened Marocha in Talks. It says, it conveys whatever that what I've read. What is your reaction to what Mr. Marocha is saying in relation to a paragraph 83?
Chair, Mr. Marocha is right to raise this issue. If you will recall, in the evidence that I gave, there was a three-way communication, which was between the President's office, myself, and Eskom.
Just hang on 1 second. I must check whether everybody can hear you. Okay, I think the people at the back indicate that they do. Okay, thank you. You may proceed.
Okay, all right. I was, in the evidence that I gave, I mentioned that there was a three-way communication happening. It was between myself, the President's office, and Eskom. And I mentioned that Mr. Sheikh had acted as the labor advisor to the Department of Public Enterprises and had been called in by the DG when this whole matter at Eskom arose. So Mr. Sheikh went to that meeting with the chair of Eskom, in my understanding, in the knowledge of the president, because he reported back to the president. But in terms of actually issuing the instruction, we issued the instruction because he was in our books. And so it was very much, so I can understand that Mr. Marocha has a right to say that and that an explanation was needed, but that is the explanation.
Yes. I think that what's important is to check as to what your stance is as to who had appointed him, because from what he says, it looks like in previous proceedings in the High Court, he says you said he had been appointed by the president. Maybe you just need to say, well, as to appointment, is it the department that had appointed him? And I don't know whether that might be, there might be a general appointment that he had been appointed by the presidency for certain things, but in regard to this specific one, it was the Department of Enterprise that appointed him to be involved. So do you want to just clarify it in those terms, in terms of appointment?
Yes. Do you want me to go ahead? Yeah.
Yes, I just want you to be able to say, were you mistaken when you may have said in previous High Court proceedings he was appointed by the president, or maybe you were not mistaken in terms of general appointment, he was appointed by the president, but for this specific matter, he was appointed by the department. I just want you to clarify it with reference to appointment, because Mr. Marocha is saying previously you said he was appointed by the president, but you now seem to suggest he was appointed by the department.
Yes. I take that Mr. Marocha is correct. I haven't checked myself that the point that I made was that he was appointed by the president. My understanding is that Mr. Sheikh had been liaising with the president for some time around this matter and had been reporting to him, and that he went to that meeting as a labor advisor, and he was also reporting to me. People who do work for a department are registered on the department's books. And I would have been very surprised at that stage that Mr. Sheikh was registered on the president's books. And so I assume what happened is that we technically maybe appointed him, but it was on the full understanding of the president, and that's confirmed in my evidence that Mr. Sheikh was reporting to the president after that meeting.
That is the only paragraph that he takes issue with. We can now move to SAFCOL, ultimately.
Please, lights stay on. Yes, okay.
You have testified about what you refer to as the improper and irregular interferences in relation to the boards of the boards and the CEO of the SOEs. Now, from page 20 of your statement, paragraph 88 to page 21, paragraph 92, you are dealing with another entity called SAFCOL. Could you please take us through and explain to us how does it fit in within the theme that we have explored with you thus far?
Okay. Chair, the South African Forestry Company is probably the smallest company in the portfolio that DPE had stewardship over. Their AGM was coming up, and there had to be a review of the chair and the board. And the AGM was on the 28th of September 2010. I had put in process a motion to put my recommendations in a cabinet memorandum to the subcommittee. And I was informed and requested to hold back until I had spoken to the president, because he wishes to speak to me about it. In annexure, could you assist me? I spoke to him telephonically. It was a time that I also spoke to him about the Transnet chair, and he wanted, the issue that he wanted to raise with me was the chair, and he wanted more details about the chair. He wanted the CV. So I said I sent on the CV of the Transnet candidates for chair and the SAFCOL chair. And he said he would speak to me thereafter and, clarify whether I can now go ahead. I sent it on, and I sent 2 reminders via my office that we were requesting an urgent meeting with him in this regard, and I never got a reply.
May I refer you to page 371 of Exhibit L? It should be on the first file. Is that
371, yes.
Is that the document that you were referring to as having dispatched to the president by yourself?
Correct.
You can talk to the chairperson about that document. Yes.
What page is that again?
371.
371.
On the first file, Mr. Chair. File number 1. You may proceed, Ms. Hogan. Yes.
So it's a letter addressed from myself to the president, dated the 8th of September. And it reads, Dear President Zuma, SAFCOL chairperson, thank you for taking the time to speak to me about this matter last night. As discussed with you, in order for us to have a more meaningful opportunity to discuss this position before taking it to Cabinet, early yesterday, I withdrew the item from the agenda of today's Eastside Committee meeting. Chair, Eastside is the name of the subcommittee of Cabinet that deals with economic matters. So the President had requested me to withdraw that memorandum, which I then did. He wanted to speak to me. However, given the urgency of the matter as a result of the AGM for SAFCOL, which is scheduled for the 28th, that was 3 weeks away, new appointments to the board that have to be made, and parliamentary and other legislative reporting requirements, I trust then that you will revert to me with your views on the proposed candidate for chairperson quite soon and before the next Cabinet meeting. Kindly note that I've written to your office for permission to submit the memo to the next Cabinet meeting. I'm available to meet with you at any time once you've had an opportunity to peruse the said CV. I trust that this is in order and look forward to hearing from your officers shortly.
And what happened after you've dispatched this letter to the President? Did he react to this letter?
No, we twice sent reminders, but I was unable to get a meeting with the President.
Do you know why was the President interested in obtaining the CVs and in knowing who was going to be the chairperson of SAFCOL?
I don't.
You have told the chair yesterday and previously that you experienced the same conduct when it related to Eskom and Transnet memorandum that had to be submitted to deal with governance issues where there were no responses to the detriment of those SOEs.
Yes, and this one even became a little bit more difficult for me to understand what was going on, because I did forward the special request. Remember, you, as a minister, if it's an urgent matter, you can forward the request. So when I did not hear from the President, I formally requested if I could put it on the agenda. It appeared on the agenda of Cabinet. And I then presumed that the President must have okayed that because it was on the agenda of Cabinet. When I went to Cabinet, and this matter was on the Cabinet agenda, I received a note in Cabinet itself from the Minister in the Presidency, the late Colin Shabane. And he requested me, he said the President was requesting that I remove this item from the agenda. And I don't know what my reply was. I must have said, look, we've been trying now for nearly a month now to get a discussion going. I've supplied all the information. The AGM is coming up. This did appear on the agenda. I presume it was in a result of the letter of request that I sent. Mr. Shabani then replied, and I have that communication. It's on Cabinet notepads. And he said, in light of what you've said, I've advised the President that you should go ahead. And I did so, and Cabinet approved those appointments.
Now, can we move on to deal with the SA to Mumbai route?
I'm sorry. I may have missed something. What you have just said now relates to SAFCOL.
Yes.
So the appointments you are talking about include the appointment of the chairperson?
Yes, and changes to the board.
And other board members.
Yes.
And the person that was then appointed as chairperson, was it the person whose CV you had sent to the President?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
She's a black woman with a very fine reputation and ability.
Yes. Ms. Hogan, you trace the issues dealing with the SA to Mumbai route from your official visit to India during June 2010.
I'm sorry again. Just to summarize with regard to SAFCOL, is it correct that would it be correct to say it's only relevant for our purposes to the extent that the president showed interest in who would be chairperson and asked for the CV?
I cannot say. I know recently, and this is only based on media speculation, that the Gupta family apparently exhibited an interest in SAFCOL, but I was not aware of that at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Can you now deal with what happened in relation to the SA to Mumbai route?
In early June 2010, I was part of an official South African ministerial delegation that was a state visit to India. I accompanied the president, and whilst I was there, I was informed by my special advisor, Ms. Fatima Hassan, that she had received information that South African Airways intended to terminate its South Africa Mumbai route. Now, I was a little bit taken aback by that because South African Airways had specifically opened up that route, not only to service a rapidly growing business relationship, but a business and tourist relationship between South Africa and India. But furthermore, South African Airways was one of the few airlines that was flying from Southern Africa, or from most of Africa, onto South America. And so the understanding was that one would attract even more passengers because you had the added benefit of, businessmen being able, and business people being able to come from India to South Africa and on to South America, depending whether they wanted to go straight to South America or whatever. I was also aware that a lot of the SA routes, international routes, were recording losses. But the Mumbai route was the least loss-making route. And I repeat that, it was really the least loss-making route. So when I heard that South African Airways was going to terminate its route to Mumbai, I was confused, and so I immediately sent an SMS to the chair of SAA, Ms. Cheryl Carolus, and I will read what I sent.
Yes, may I refer to Annexure P? Mr. Chair, it's on page 373.
373.
373, yes.
Yes, 373.
Is that the screenshot of your SMS
Yes.
from your phone?
Chair, you will see there's firstly an irrelevant communication for these purposes, which is the first one from Cheryl Carolus. The second, which is marked the 2nd of June, which is from myself. It says, Cheryl, I'm in India with the president now. Is there any truth to the rumor that South African Airways is going to terminate its route to Mumbai? There is a rumor here and we need clarity. Cheryl immediately responded on the same day and she said, no, we will not be terminating Mumbai. It must be Jet Airways still lobbying for this. We remain on the route with 4 frequencies. All the best for India. Okay.
And what then happened after this SMS communication between yourself and the then chairperson of SAA?
Correct.
What happened?
Then my assistant, my advisor, Fatima Hassan, began to point out to me that at a lot of not a lot, I can't really say how many, but it was apparent that, and I saw this at least on one occasion, that at the off-site meetings that I was having with various people based in India, as you do as a minister when you're there, that Mr. Naresh Goyal, who was the chair CEO of Eskom, was like pushing himself, of Jet Airways, was like pushing himself into those meetings. And I was a little concerned about that. I hadn't been invited, but she just pointed it out to me, and I said, look, I'm not going to meet with Mr. Goyal. From what I'd heard from the chair of SAA, I would need to be properly briefed, and I didn't want to give I did not want to engage on this matter. It became almost desperate. We had to attend a fashion show. Yes, you do those when you're on a ministerial visit. It was a fashion show by the Indian fashion industry. And as I was leaving, Mr. Goyal literally jumped over the chairs, knocking them over and creating a huge performance, and stood in front of me and stopped me almost and said, Minister, I need to see you. And I said to him, before you meet with me, I think you should meet with the board and with the CEO of SAA, and I have nothing to say to you now.
Did he tell you at that stage as to why he wanted to see you?
No. Yes.
Yes, may proceed.
And then on paragraph 97, on the 30th of August, Chair, you will remember this all took place early June, but on the 30th of August 2010, Ms. Carola sent me another text message stating as follows.
Mr. Chair, you can find that communication from page 374. If you may turn to page 374, Ms. Hogan.
I've got it on 374.
Yes, 374.
Yeah. Chair, it's on page 374, and it's dated the 30th of August from the chair of SAA. Hi B, for your information, South African Airways is at Scopa tomorrow. That's a standing committee on public accounts. Also note that the CEO chairman from Jet Airways India will be in South Africa for the India-South Africa meeting. He's lobbying hard for SAA to end its Mumbai flight. We reject this. Please let me know if he's trying to meet with you so we can brief. I apologized for the meeting, said he should talk to Caesar, who was the CEO of SAA. Regards, Cheryl. And then I just confirmed that he hadn't tried to meet with me.
Yes. Did you know at the time as to whether Jet Airways had any links with any other families in South Africa?
No, I didn't.
You did not.
Yeah.
But you only can testify about this persistent and lobbying that was made for SAA to cancel its route to Mumbai, to India.
Yes, there were the rumors going around, yes.
Now, from paragraph 99 to 101 of your statement, you are referring to rumors which included Ms. Fakey Mentor. Are you there?
Correct.
Can you please, in your own words, tell the chair about those rumors?
Chair, on the 7th, let me say up front that for quite a long time in 2010, there were endless rumors about a reshuffle, not only myself, but other ministers, and endless speculation. You know how things go. And my special advisor, Ms. Hassan, would just inform me. And, you know, it was interesting how things changed over time and who was going to be who and what in the zoo. And on the 7th of June, that would be Annexure R. Am I right?
Are you referring
You are
to
at
Annexure P?
Are you at paragraph 99 of your statement?
Yes, paragraph 99.
Yes.
And it's reflected in Annexure R on page 375. And my advisor just says, you know, the rumors that are going around. The deputy minister, and that she was referring to Enoch Godongwana, becomes the minister. I become the deputy minister for health. Faiki Mentor, the deputy minister for DPE. That's, you know, that is one of several stories that I was hearing all the time.
Yes. Now, Ms. Faiki Mentor did testify before the chair. She also testified about the events of October 2010, including the SAA India route to the India route. Mr. Chair, just to link that evidence, I will be referring Ms. Hogan to Exhibit D1. If you may, we have prepared extracts of that evidence. And if you may go to paragraph 60 and to paragraph 61. Are you there?
60 and 61.
Paragraphs,
Okay.
yes. Ms. Mentor told the commission that on paragraph 60, she said that I had communicated with Mr. Lukala Kaunda, who at the time I thought was Mr. Zuma's personal assistant, in order to secure a meeting with Mr. Zuma on one Sunday evening in or around October 2010. If I may pause there, Ms. Hogan, you were removed around that time, around October 2010.
I was still the minister.
Yes. When were you removed?
The 31st of October.
Of October, yes. So she's also testifying about the events of October 2010. She says that about a week or so before the cabinet reshuffle, I received a telephone call from Ms. Kaunda to say that the president could see me the following day. I think Ms. Kaunda was his PA, although it could have been a different position, but she definitely appeared to be from the president's office. Ms. Kaunda informed me that Mr. Zuma would be available to meet with me the next day, being the Monday. And she testified that when she met with the Guptas at their compound, then she was offered a position around the same period that you were also talking about the rumors.
Yes.
Now, she also testified, if I may refer you to page 26, paragraph 89 to 90. She testified about the SA to India route, which there were speculations or lobbying that the SAA must terminate. On paragraph 89, she says, A.J. Gupta went on to talk about the turnaround strategy of SAA and that it was not yielding results. He commented that the SAA route to India was not profitable and it was costing the country a lot of money. If I may pause there, Ms. Hogan, we know now from the SMS communication between yourself and the then chairperson, the chairperson said that there was no intention of SAA terminating that route. Am I correct?
Correct.
And Ms. Mento proceeded to say that I pointed to the bilateral relation between India and South Africa. Today, you have also touched, Ms. Hogan, to that evidence in a way that to explain to the chair that that route was important for trade reasons.
Extremely important,
Yes.
particularly in the light of BRICS as well.
That's what Ms. Mento told the chair. She proceeded to say that I pointed to the bilateral relation between India and South Africa and the fact that passengers and goods are transported via the India route on a daily basis. I asked him what would happen to those passengers and goods if the airline route was cancelled. He told me not to worry, as they were in a partnership with an airline that could take over this route. Paragraph 90, it says, immediately after his statement about SAA's India route, A.J. Gupta then very casually and much to my astonishment proceeded to offer me the position of the Minister of Public Enterprises if I would agree to facilitate the closure of SAA's India route when I became the minister. A.J. Gupta said there would be a cabinet reshuffle in the next week, and he said he had an offer for me. He said that I could be the next Minister of Public Enterprises if I agreed to facilitate the closure of the road. And you have testified about two important incidents. The first one was your visit to India, where the chairperson of Jet Airways sought a meeting with you, and also that there were rumors about the pending cabinet reshuffling.
Correct.
Yes. Ms. Hogan, I now need to deal with certain issues that do not appear in your witness statement, but which are relevant for the terms of reference of this commission, and also in order to clarify certain aspects from your evidence thus far. You were interviewed by the public protector in relation to some of the issues that are relevant to the terms of reference of this commission.
Correct.
Yes.
Sorry.
May I refer you to page 400? Are you there?
Yes.
You will see that that document.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mukwena. That is now long after her dismissal, when she is interviewed by the public protector. I just want us to go back and tie the evidence properly with regard to the dismissal. The issue of Eskom and Mr. Marocha and his ultimate departure, that took place, I think you said, around September, October 2009.
Late October, early November 2009.
Yes. And as you indicated, there was active involvement in regard to that issue by yourself, by the president, and the board, and Mr. Marocha.
Correct.
Yes. And then there was the Transnet issue. In terms of timelines, you dealt with that from when to when?
Okay. The Transnet issue was immediately before me when I became a Minister of Public Enterprises. That was in May. And formally, when Mr. Paswana, the chair of Transnet, met with me in June and handed me the recommendation for Mr. Maseko, you know, with all the accompanying documentation. So the Transnet issue took place between 2009, I would say June 2009.
From immediately after you became minister?
Yes. Right through, it was only resolved in the following year, in June 2010, when Mr. Gama was dismissed by Transnet.
Yes. And then after he had been dismissed, you were still engaged with it insofar as there was a need to still fill the position of CEO for Transnet, isn't it?
It is correct. The candidate, Mr. Maseko, had already in September 2009 withdrawn his candidature. And the president would not allow in cabinet any memo that then dealt with the CEO of Transnet until such time that the disciplinary process was finalized of Mr. Gama. So once that was finalized and Mr. Gama was dismissed, the Deputy Minister and I were of the view that Transnet Board of Directors, their tenure had to be twice renewed because we were not in a position to add or move directors around, and 4 had resigned fairly earlier on. And to their credit, they had stayed on in the job. But the AGM was now coming up, and we had to make now put a new board in place, retaining some and others. And it would be that board that would then initiate a new CEO process. It would have been problematic if the old board initiated a CEO process, then left, and then a new board comes in. So we were of the view that the incoming board would then conduct a professional CEO search.
So, as at the time that Mr. Gama was dismissed, the position of Group CEO for Transnet remained vacant, and it had been vacant for many months.
Of the full-time CEO, there was an acting CEO, Mr. Wells, who had been acting since February, end of February, beginning of March 2009.
Yes, it was vacant in terms of permanent appointment, but there was an acting CEO.
Correct.
And as at the time that Mr. Gama was dismissed, there was already a vacancy for chairperson of the Transit Board, or not yet?
There was an acting person for the chairperson of Transnet. In relation to that, Chair, you would recall that I had proposed 2 names at the President's request, and I had sent him a letter attaching the CVs. I'd withdrawn the memo from the Economic Subcommittee cluster and sent him the CVs as he had requested, but I never got an answer to him. So I then later, once again, requested that the President permit me to place the proposal for Transnet Board straight onto the agenda of Cabinet, in that it was urgent. There was an AGM coming up.
So the other 4 members of the Transit Board that you said resigned, resigned around which month, if you're able to recall?
I can't be exact about it, and they might have resigned at different times, but some of them resigned shortly after the recommendation of Mr. Maseko and all the problems that emerged after that.
Was the resignation in any way connected with the non-acceptance of their recommendation, or was it just something else?
I never got any formal, they had, they just said they would move on now.
The number of members of the Transnet board was what? Was it about 6? Well, normally the full complement would have been more or less what?
Yes. At times, with boards, at times you don't make a full appointment to a board because weaknesses in the board
if it's difficult to find, don't worry about it.
Yes,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
there was. The board, as I recall, and I could be corrected, the board at that time was not the full quota, but it was still quorate. And when I put through a cabinet memo, it was then virtually a full component. I think it was just 1 or 2 absences from it.
So when you were dismissed, the vacancies in the board had not been filled yet.
No.
And they were subsequently filled in December or so after you had left.
November it was. What I'd done, there was a cabinet memorandum which I'd put through proposing a new board and chair for Transnet. And that cabinet memorandum was dated the 27th of October, 2010. And Chair, you will recall that I was then dismissed by President Zuma on the 31st of October, 4 days later. And then Mr. Gigaba was appointed minister. And I think it was, and then the cabinet meeting that immediately followed, my cabinet memorandum was not on that agenda. It had been removed. And then Mr. Gigaba put through a new proposal. He did retain some of the people I had proposed, but he also had new appointments.
So, in terms of events that may have entailed sharp differences between yourself and the president, am I right to say that does not appear to have been any events close to your dismissal?
No, there were no sharp differences of opinion. It was just the battle that I was continuing having with the president to have anything, a cabinet memorandum submitted to cabinet.
Yes, yes.
He was thwarting that, but there were no sharp differences of view.
Yes, yes.
There was one instance in September 2009, and my apologies, I don't have this as part of my affidavit, but I think it was in September 2009 that Cabinet appointed an interministerial committee consisting of myself and Minister Gordon, who was the Minister of Finance at the time. And our job was, part of it was to look at the state of the SOEs, and to look at the funding model and to make recommendations thereon. Because both Mr. Gordon and I were aware that the SOEs were heading for real financial problems, and we needed to work on a proper. And that was towards September or so 2009, and at his budget speech, or close, not his budget speech, the President's State of the Nation address, or close thereto, the following year, the President announced, and he hadn't spoken to myself or Mr. Gordon, he announced that he had set up a commission of inquiry into state-owned enterprises headed by Ria Piecha. And there was a lot of confusion then that was only really resolved about 6 months later as to whether the interministerial committee set up by Cabinet would still go on with its work or would not. And at times it seemed that the President's office was saying the two processes would run parallel. But finally, Mr. Chabane, towards late 2010, clarified that the interministerial process would be cancelled. The President had called me in. I can't remember the exact date. And this was sometime after he announced that commission, and informed me that I may not make any major decision about any state-owned enterprise until that commission had reported.
Was the Ria Piecha that you say was to be involved in that commission the same Ria Piecha who became National Commissioner of Police? Is that something you know or you don't know?
Yes, that's correct.
It is the same person?
It's the same person.
Okay. And as far as you know, was that a formal commission of inquiry? You know, sometimes people talk about a commission of inquiry.
Yes, it did.
It was a formal
my
commission
apologies
of inquiry.
to the evidence leader on this matter.
Yes.
It was a formal commission of inquiry. It had difficulties getting up and running. But and it reported after I was finished being a minister. And I thought some of the recommendations were good recommendations. I'm not certain to what extent they were implemented.
Yes. Now, I know that you said that the President did not, at the meeting he had with you, together with Mr. Mantashe on the 31st of October, did not tell you what the reasons were why you were being removed from the position of Minister of Public Enterprises. But are you able, on an analysis of issues and what happened, are you able to say what you believe the reason was, or are you not able to say?
Chair, I can only speculate. But when you look at events that followed my my disappointment.
That preceded your dismissal.
My dismissal, not my disappointment.
Was the dismissal not your disappointment too?
Well, that I don't want to speculate publicly. It just became apparent, you know, it will be very apparent in all of my testimony that the Gupta family or any of those who've been mentioned as being part of a state capture process, it really doesn't feature in my submission. But when I look at some of the appointments that were made subsequent to my dismissal, for instance, on Transnet, Iqbal Sharma, who had worked in trade and industry, was appointed by Mr. Gigaba to the Transnet board, and we know that he then headed an acquisitions and procurement subcommittee, and that has been heavily involved in whatever transpired thereafter. Mr. Makwana was, as chair of Eskom, was several months later after Mr. Gigaba, or sometime after, was just immediately removed. And Mr. Magubane came in. What really, Ben Ngubane, sorry. What worried me is that I was fired in October 2010. Mr. Molefe, Brian Molefe, was then appointed as the CEO early 2011. And Mr. Gama was reappointed into Transnet. It must, as the CEO of Transnet Freight Rail, the position he had been dismissed from. He was reappointed in, must have been about June, July 2011. And then, of course, as we know, when Mr. Molefe was then transferred to Eskom as the CEO there, Mr. Gama was then appointed the group CEO. So those things, in retrospect, probably have given me more insight into what have been happening. It's just pure speculation. At the time, my sense is that the President and I had very, very different views on governance, on constitutional and legislative requirements of those in office, and that the President felt that I was a hindrance to him in that respect. But I didn't enjoy his confidence.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just to complete the picture, those issues are covered in Ms. Hogan's witness statement from page 15, paragraph 58 to paragraph 62.
Thank you.
Do you want me to? No.
We will deal with them after the T adjournment, which I'm quite presumptuous that we'll be taking now, subject to the chairpersons.
Well, we can take it now, or we can take it at 11:30, depending on whether you are starting on something new.
No, we may proceed, Chair. Just want, we may proceed.
Okay, all right.
If you can go to page 15, simply to complete the discussion between yourself and the Chair. 15.
Page
15.
15. Okay. Yes.
And from paragraph 59, and I will simply read them, and you can talk to those issues thereafter. You say that my Transnet Cabinet memo 10/2010 appeared 3 days later as an agenda item on the Cabinet ESEID subcommittee of 3rd November 2010 and was withdrawn. This confirms what you've been saying to the Chair. This meeting took place 3 days after President Zuma dismissed me. 60. On 8th December 2010, Cabinet approved Mr. Gigaba's recommendation of the board at Transnet. Iqbal Sharma, a former business partner of Gupta associate Salim Issa, was on that list and was later appointed as head of the procurement committee at Transnet. And you confirm that is in line with what you were discussing with the Chair?
Correct.
And you say on paragraph 61, on the 16th February 2013, Cabinet approved the appointment of Brian Molefe as Group CEO Transnet, and a little while later, Mr. Gama was reappointed as CEO of TFR on the grounds that his misconduct had not been serious enough to warrant his dismissal. You conclude by saying that on the 16th March 2011, the Transnet Board approved the reappointment of Mr. Gama as CEO of TFR, justifying it on the ground that the findings in his disciplinary hearing had not warranted a dismissal. Do you confirm that those are the issues that you were discussing with the Chair, but there at least you are putting also the dates on when these issues occurred.
Yes. Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I am now moving to a new topic that I want to converse with Ms. Hogan pertaining to her interview with the public protector.
Okay, thank you. Let's take the tea adjournment and we will resume at 11:45.
Thank you.
We adjourn.
All right.